On Christmas morning, I stood in my small kitchen, packing homemade cookies and gifts I had wrapped with care. I told myself this year would finally feel warm, calm, and maybe even loving. I wanted to believe my family would welcome me the way I always welcome them. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my heart, not knowing what waited for me. But by the end of that day, everything I believed about them would break, and the gift I left behind would change everything. If you're watching this, please like the video, subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. That morning began like any other Christmas Eve I had lived in my 65 years. I woke up early, the way older women often do, long before the sun was ready to shine. I moved slowly around my small kitchen, humming softly while I baked cookies the same way my mother once taught me. I mixed sugar and cinnamon, shaped the dough with my hands, and let the smell fill the room. It brought a little warmth to my heart, a little comfort. I wanted to walk into my family's home carrying something made with love. I told myself this year would be different. I told myself they would look at me and finally see someone who cared, not someone they could laugh at or push aside. I pulled out the gifts I had wrapped the night before. Nothing expensive, but thoughtful things. A warm scarf for my mother because she always complained about her neck being cold. A book for my sister, one she once mentioned wanting but never bought. A small set of paints for my niece who loved to draw. Things chosen with a heart that still believed my family would appreciate effort, even if they didn't appreciate me. I tied ribbons, checked the tags twice, and placed everything neatly in 2 bags. I felt a hint of excitement, the kind I hadn't felt in years, thinking maybe we could have a peaceful Christmas for once. I made myself a cup of tea and sat for a moment at the table, looking at the lights blinking on my small tree. I let myself hope. I let myself imagine laughter that didn't hurt, conversations that didn't sting, maybe even a hug from someone who meant it. Hope is something older women cling to, even when experience tells us otherwise. I thought all the tension from past years was behind us. I thought they had grown out of their sharp comments. I thought being family meant something again. I dressed slowly, choosing a simple sweater I had knitted last winter. It wasn't fashionable, but it was warm. I brushed my hair, put on small earrings, and added a little lipstick, just enough to feel presentable. I gave myself one last look in the mirror and whispered that everything would be fine. We lie to ourselves sometimes because we need to, because the truth is too heavy to carry before it arrives. When the bags were ready and the cookies were sealed tight, I stepped outside into the cold air. Snow covered the walkway, and the sky looked pale, holding back a storm. I locked my door and took a deep breath, clutching my gifts carefully. I walked slowly, steadying myself with every step, reminding myself that family was worth the effort. I told myself they would smile when they saw me. I told myself they would appreciate that I came early to help set the table, cook, or simply be present. As I reached my mother's house, I noticed all the cars already lined up outside. Everyone had arrived early this year. A small smile formed on my face because that meant they were excited for the holiday. I imagined laughter inside, warm conversations, maybe some music playing. My heart softened a little more. For a moment, I felt like a young girl again, walking toward a home where love waited behind the door. I climbed the steps with careful feet, balancing my gifts so they wouldn't fall. Before I knocked, I heard voices from inside. I paused, thinking they might be talking about dinner or kids or gifts. I didn't expect anything unusual. I wasn't preparing for anything painful. I was just a mother, a daughter, a grandmother, someone hoping to be included, hoping to belong, hoping to feel the warmth of family. I stood there holding my bags, trying to steady my breathing, unaware that the next few moments would change everything I believed about the people inside that house. I didn't know that the kindness I carried would be met with something far colder than the winter air. Because while I walked toward them with love, they were waiting inside with something else, something I had never imagined. I thought Christmas would heal old wounds. Instead, it was about to reveal every crack I had ignored for years. I stood at the doorstep, clutching the gift bags and balancing the cookie tin in my arms. I was just about to knock when I heard my name. At first, I thought they were speaking kindly, maybe planning something sweet, maybe saying they were glad I was coming early. But the tone wasn't warm. It wasn't loving. It wasn't even neutral. It was sharp, mocking, the kind of tone people use when they talk about someone they don't respect. I froze, one hand hovering above the door, unable to move. Their voices drifted through the hallway clearly, almost as if the house itself wanted me to hear. My sister's voice was the first one I recognized. She laughed loudly and said, "Make sure she sits at the far end. I don't want her ruining the pictures." Another voice chimed in, my brother-in-law, probably pouring himself a drink. "Don't let her near the kids with those old lady stories. They'll die of boredom before we open gifts." They all laughed. It wasn't gentle laughter. It was cruel, the kind that turns your stomach. I took one small step back, trying to process it. I reminded myself that people joke, people say silly things, but the next voice shattered that fragile hope. It was my mother. Her voice carried that tone I knew too well: judgment, disappointment, irritation. "Don't put her in the main dining room. Use the folding chair. And keep her away from the tree," she said. "She always brings those cheap gifts. Just push them aside and pretend you didn't see them." My chest tightened. I had spent the entire morning wrapping those gifts with care. I had checked the tags over and over to make sure everything looked nice. I had baked cookies the way she once taught me, and now she was calling them cheap. She was calling me cheap. Then came my niece's voice, young but sharp, shaped by the adults around her. "Should we record her opening the sweater we got her? Her reaction will be hilarious." Another round of laughter. My hands started shaking. The ribbons on the gifts rustled with the trembling, but they weren't done. My sister continued, "Let's pretend we forgot she was coming. That'll be fun." And my mother added, "Just don't let her sit near the front. She'll ruin the pictures. Nobody wants to see her outfit." My outfit. The same simple sweater I had carefully chosen, thinking it looked nice, thinking it was enough, thinking I was enough. I stood there on the porch, hearing every voice, every laugh, every plan that wasn't meant for me to hear. They were talking about me like I wasn't family, like I wasn't someone they once hugged, once trusted, once called during hard times. They were planning my humiliation like it was a game for Christmas entertainment. They were treating me like a burden, a problem, a joke. My heart didn't just crack. It shattered. Because it wasn't strangers speaking. It was my family, my own mother, my siblings, my niece. People I had cooked for, cared for, supported, defended. People I showed up for, even when they didn't deserve it. And now I stood outside in the cold, hands trembling, listening to them tear me apart like I was nothing. I thought about leaving right then, just turning around, walking back to my car, and pretending I never came. But something told me to wait. Something deep inside whispered, "Listen, hear everything." Because the truth is, the moment you hear the real words people speak when they think you're not listening, that's the moment you learn where you truly stand. I heard my name again. My brother-in-law said, "Do we still go with the joke gift plan? You know, the empty box?" My sister replied, laughing with her whole chest, "Oh yes, let's hand it to her in front of everyone. She'll pretend to be grateful. She always does." They all laughed again. I closed my eyes, trying not to cry, trying to steady my breathing. Every word felt like a slap, each one hitting a part of me that had already been bruised by years of being the quiet one, the helpful one, the one who never fought back. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had mistaken my silence for stupidity. They had mistaken my heart for something cheap. So I stepped back from the door slowly, not because I was running, not because I was scared, but because I knew something important. I wasn't walking into that house, not as the woman they expected. They were about to receive a Christmas gift they never saw coming. I stood there on the porch, frozen in place, trying to breathe through the sting of everything I had just heard. My hands were still holding the gifts, the cookies, the small pieces of love I had prepared. I felt old in that moment, not because of age, but because of the sudden weight of knowing exactly what my family thought of me. Yet somehow, even with all that pain, I kept listening. Something inside me needed to hear the full truth. No more guessing, no more hoping, no more pretending they loved me the way I loved them. The voices inside grew louder, chairs moved, people were getting ready. Then I heard my mother again, her voice sharper this time. "Make sure she sits on the broken chair," she said. "The one with the wobbly leg. It fits her." They laughed again. I nearly dropped the cookie tin. My own mother thought humiliating me was funny. The woman who raised me, the woman I cared for when she was sick, the woman whose yard I cleaned every weekend. She wanted me sitting on a broken chair like a joke. My sister added, "Don't forget the plan. When she walks in, everyone looks surprised, like we didn't expect her. That'll be great for the video." They were planning a performance, and I was the punchline. And then came the moment, the slip that exposed everything about them and everything I had been blind to. My mother said, "And don't open her gift in front of her. Just put it under the table. I don't want to fake gratitude for something cheap." Cheap, that was the word. Cheap. A word she had used so many times in the past, but this time it hit differently. Because I had worked 2 jobs to survive after my divorce. I had saved pennies to buy those gifts. I had spent nights knitting scarves and baking because I wanted to be thoughtful. And she called it cheap, called me cheap, called my effort worthless. Then my brother-in-law said, "Honestly, she should be grateful we even invited her." My sister replied, "Yeah, she's lucky we even tolerate her." Tolerate. Like I was a stain on their holiday instead of part of their family. But the part that cut deepest wasn't the words. It was the laughter afterward. That laughter told me everything. They didn't misspeak. They weren't joking. They meant it. Then I heard my niece, sweet little girl I once babysat for years. "Are we giving her the empty box?" My sister laughed. "Yes, but record her face. She'll pretend to like it. She always does." Even the child was joining in. I felt something inside me shift, quietly, like a thread snapping. I wasn't crying. I wasn't shaking anymore. The sadness was still there, but now something steadier replaced it. Clarity. For the first time in years, I saw my family exactly as they were. Cruel, pretending, using me when needed, mocking me when convenient. They didn't love me. They loved having someone beneath them, someone easy to ridicule. But life has a way of giving answers in unexpected moments. Because right then, while they were busy planning my humiliation, I heard a second conversation from the living room. Something softer, something I wasn't meant to hear. My cousin whispered, "Did you pay her back for the loan she gave you?" My sister snapped, "No, and I'm not going to. She'll forget about it. She always does." Then she added, "And don't mention the bills she covered last year. If Mom knew, she'd ask why we didn't help her instead." That was the slip, the truth slipping right through their mouths without planning. My family owed me money. More than I remembered. More than I ever kept track of. I was the one who paid for their emergencies. I was the one who bailed them out quietly. I was the one who lent money without paperwork, and they repaid me with humiliation. I realized then that they weren't just unkind. They were ungrateful. They weren't just thoughtless. They were opportunistic. They weren't just planning to embarrass me. They were hiding the fact that they took advantage of me for years. I stepped back from the door, not because I was giving up, but because I suddenly had something stronger than pain. I had knowledge. I had proof. I had leverage. And I had a reason to stop letting these people treat me like nothing. They thought they were preparing a joke for me, but they had no idea I was about to give them a Christmas surprise they would never forget. And in that moment, Standing on the porch with snow under my feet, I whispered to myself, "They will not break me. Not today." As I walked back to my car with the cold air biting my face, memories started rising one by one, like a film I never asked to watch. I kept hearing their laughter behind the door, but I also heard the echo of all the years I stood by them, all the years they never remembered, all the sacrifices they forgot as soon as they no longer benefited them. I placed the gift bags gently in the passenger seat and sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, letting the truth settle. They didn't just dislike me, they enjoyed hurting me, and that's when the flashbacks came. I remembered the years after my divorce when I worked double shifts to make ends meet. I cooked in the mornings at a diner and cleaned offices at night. I never told anyone in the family about the days I cried myself to sleep because the bills looked bigger than my paycheck. I didn't want to worry them. I thought protecting them from my struggle was the right thing to do, but they never asked anyway. They only saw the part of my life that looked quiet, simple, easy. They never saw the bruises on my legs from standing long hours. They never saw my cracked hands from scrubbing floors. They never saw how hard I fought to stay alive when loneliness felt heavier than any debt. I remembered how, when my sister needed money for her daughter's college books, she called me crying. I lent her $400 without blinking, even though I barely had $800 left for myself. When my brother-in-law's car broke down, I paid half the repair bill so he could drive to work. When my mother's roof leaked, I took out a small personal loan to help her fix it because she said she was embarrassed to ask anyone else. Every time they came to me with a problem, I helped, not because I was naive, but because I believed that was what family did. But I never saw any of that returned. They called me quiet, yet expected me to show up first. They called me simple, yet came to me for help when things fell apart. They called me cheap, yet let me cover their debts in secret. And worst of all, they called me weak, simply because I never fought back. I remembered the nights I stayed up sewing clothes for my niece when my sister couldn't afford Christmas gifts. I watched that little girl open presents I made with my own hands, and she squealed with joy. My sister took the credit and didn't correct anyone. I didn't mind at the time. I was just happy the child had something nice. But hearing that same niece now laugh at the idea of humiliating me lit a fire inside me that I didn't know I still had. My entire life, I was the helper, the one who gave, the one who stayed quiet so others could feel loud, the one who made space so others could take it. I never asked for anything back, not a thank you, not recognition, not even kindness. I just wanted peace. I just wanted family. But standing there earlier, outside that door, listening to them plan jokes about me, I realized they didn't just take advantage of my kindness. They built their comfort on it. But here's the part they forgot. Quiet people aren't weak. Quiet people see everything. Quiet people remember everything. Quiet people often carry more strength in one breath than loud people carry in a lifetime. And I wasn't the poor, pitiful woman they thought I was. No, I had built myself from the ground up. I had survived heartbreak and betrayal before. I had found ways to rebuild when nobody was watching. Over the years, I worked those two jobs not only to live, but to save. I saved slowly, dollar by dollar, little by little. I saved money in a separate account no one knew about. I didn't spend on luxuries. I didn't show off. I lived with intention, I lived with caution, and because of that, I had built a quiet foundation no one had ever bothered to ask about. While they were laughing about my cheap gifts, none of them knew that I had more money in my savings than all of them combined after paying off their debts. None of them knew that the scarf I knitted for my mother was made of expensive wool I purchased with care, not something cheap pulled from a discount bin. None of them knew that the cookie recipe I made was the same one she once taught me before she forgot who she used to be. I wasn't weak, I wasn't helpless. I wasn't small, I was simply quiet. And quiet people can be the most dangerous because we listen, we observe, we prepare, and when the time comes, we act with precision. Sitting in my car, watching the snow fall on the windshield, I wiped my tears. Not because I was breaking, but because I finally understood that the woman they thought they could humiliate was stronger than all of them. And I was done being the family's punching bag. The gift I would give them next wasn't wrapped in ribbons. It was wrapped in truth. When I drove away from the house that evening, the words I heard kept repeating in my head like a broken radio. I kept thinking, maybe I misunderstood them. Maybe they were joking. Maybe the stress of the holiday made them careless. But the more I replayed it, the clearer it became. They weren't joking. They were planning. Every laugh, every whisper, every word had intention behind it. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. I parked outside my own home, but instead of going inside immediately, I sat for a few minutes just trying to catch my breath. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the shock of finally understanding how deep their contempt for me ran. I thought maybe this year would be different. Maybe I had earned some warmth after everything I'd done for them over the years. But instead, they were preparing a show, and I was supposed to be the clown. As I walked into my small living room, I kept hearing my sister-in-law's voice. Make sure she knows her place. Those words repeated in my head like someone scraping metal. It hurt more than hearing them laugh at me. It hurt more than listening to my mother dismiss me like I was an inconvenience. That one sentence revealed everything. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as someone beneath them, someone they could step on for fun, someone they could use to make themselves feel bigger. I placed my bag on the couch and thought back on all the little hints I'd ignored over the years, the small comments that didn't seem important at the time, the way they never asked how I was doing, the way they always talked over me, the way they dismissed my ideas, my stories, my presence, the way they rolled their eyes when I brought homemade gifts instead of something expensive from a mall. I always told myself they were just stressed or busy, but now I understood. They were grooming me to accept disrespect. And as painful as that realization was, it woke something inside me. I replayed the conversation I overheard again and again. My brother joking about giving me a broken chair so they could laugh when I nearly fell. My niece suggesting they record the whole thing for social media because people love old lady fails. My sister saying she hoped I'd bring my usual boring gifts so they could pretend they forgot to open them. And then my mother's voice, the one that still has the power to cut me deeper than anyone else, saying, just let her sit in the corner. She's used to it. That moment broke me. But right after it broke me, it rebuilt me. I walked into my kitchen and opened the small drawer where I kept old receipts, notes, and reminders. My hands started organizing without me even thinking about it. I found the old IOUs my siblings had written, the ones they thought I forgot. I found the bank transfers where I sent money to my mother when she couldn't pay her bills. I found the messages from my brother asking me for rent money just until next month and never paying it back. I found the texts where my niece asked me to help her with her tuition because her parents couldn't afford it. Every single paper, every single message, every single plea, they all pointed in one direction. I was never the burden they mocked. I was their support system, their quiet safety net, their silent helping hand. And yet they planned to humiliate me. I laughed, a soft, tired laugh, as I placed each document in a neat pile. For years I kept those things just as reminders for myself, not as weapons. But now I understood that those same papers held the truth they wanted to bury, and I wasn't going to let them. I stood up, walked to the small cabinet where I stored the gifts I made for them, wrapped neatly, each one thoughtful and personal, and placed them gently on the dining table. The sight of them brought fresh pain. All that time, energy, and love. And for what? To be mocked? To be used? To be treated like a joke? No. Not anymore. They wanted to embarrass me in front of the whole family. They wanted to make me feel small, weak, and alone. They wanted a show. Well, I would give them one. Not with drama, not with shouting, but with truth. Cold, clear truth. As I gathered the documents and prepared each envelope, I felt my hands stop shaking. I felt my breathing slow down. I felt my heart steady itself. Betrayal can break you, but it can also sharpen you. And at that moment, I became sharper than I had ever been in my life. My family thought they were planning a performance to laugh at me. What they didn't know was that I was planning something too, something that would make them choke on their own words. Because humiliation cuts deep, but exposure cuts deeper. When I walked back into that house after overhearing everything, I didn't walk in as the same woman who had arrived earlier with cookies and gifts. Something inside me had shifted, quietly but completely. I didn't storm through the door. I didn't cry or shout. I just stepped inside softly, like I always did, still holding the bags I had brought, still holding on to the last little thread of hope that maybe, just maybe, someone inside would look at me and choose kindness. But kindness was not waiting for me, not that night. The moment I stepped into the hallway, my mother came out of the dining room as if she had been waiting for me, but not in a warm way. She looked annoyed, irritated, almost angry that I existed. She crossed her arms and gave me that familiar look I had seen my whole childhood, the one that said without speaking, "Why are you here?" She didn't greet me. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't even look at the bags in my hand. Instead, she said in a tone that could have frozen the walls, "Just stay out of the way. Don't ruin tonight." Those words hit me harder than anything the rest of the family had said. Hearing my siblings laugh about me was painful, yes, but hearing my own mother tell me not to ruin Christmas, as if my presence alone was a problem, that cut deeper. And what hurt the most was how normal it felt to her. She said it casually, like it was a rule she had repeated for years, like it was the natural order of things. I stood there for a moment, still holding the gifts I had wrapped with so much love, feeling the weight of her words in my chest. A part of me wanted to defend myself, to ask why she talked to me like that, to remind her that I had come early to help, that I had always shown up, that I had always tried to be the good daughter. But another part of me, the wiser part, knew that asking for love from someone who had none to give was useless. She turned away from me and walked back toward the dining room, where the laughter continued. Laughter I now knew was about me. My siblings were still chatting, making jokes, planning their little fun, completely unaware that I had heard everything. My mother didn't even look back to see if I followed her. To her, I was already invisible. I took a slow, deep breath. Something inside me hardened, not in anger, but in clarity. I realized in that moment that I had spent my entire life trying to earn a place in a family that never intended to give me one. I realized I had been bending myself for years to fit into a space that had been carved without me. And I realized that I didn't want to spend one more Christmas trying to prove my worth to people who discussed me like a joke. Still, I walked into the dining room, not because I wanted to be there, but because I needed to see it with my own eyes, needed to confirm what my ears had already told me. My mother was at the head of the table giving instructions. My sister was decorating cookies I had brought as if she had made them herself. My brother was laughing loudly, probably at another joke about me. They all acted like a family enjoying warm holidays together. But not one of them looked up when I entered. Not one paused. Not one said hello. I placed the bags gently on a chair. No one noticed. I stood there for a moment longer, watching them, studying each face carefully. I searched for a hint of guilt, a moment of hesitation, a flicker of recognition that what they were doing was cruel. But I found none. They were settled in their roles, comfortable in their cruelty, prepared to embarrass me without a second thought. My mother finally glanced up when I moved toward the door. "If you're going to stay," she said in the same cold tone, "don't draw attention to yourself. We have guests coming who don't know how difficult you can be." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the truth had finally hit me so hard that it left no room for pain. My whole life, I had been waiting for her approval, for her warmth, for her acceptance. And in that moment, I saw clearly. I would never get it. Not from her, not from any of them. And something inside me closed quietly, like a door being locked forever. Instead of arguing, instead of begging, instead of breaking down, I simply nodded once. Not because she deserved that respect, but because I had already decided what I needed to do. I picked up my bags, not the gifts, just my bag, and walked out of the house without another word. As I stepped into the cold night air, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The kind of calm that comes when you stop trying to hold together something that was never whole. The kind of calm that comes when you choose yourself. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I didn't look back. I had been their easy target for years, but not anymore. That night, for the first time, I stopped trying to belong to a family that wanted to break me, and I began the quiet work of standing up for myself. When I stepped out into the cold night air and pulled the door shut behind me, I didn't feel shaken the way they expected me to feel. I didn't feel confused or ashamed or small. Instead, I felt a strange, steady calm, the kind that comes when a person finally stops begging to be loved in the wrong place. Snowflakes drifted around me like soft reminders that the world outside that house was bigger, kinder, and wider than the narrow hearts I had just walked away from. For the first time in years, I felt my spine straighten. My breath felt lighter, and my mind became clear in a way it hadn't been in a long time. I walked to my car, placed my bag inside, and sat for a moment with my hands resting on the steering wheel. I didn't rush. I didn't shake. I didn't cry. Instead, I watched the lights in my mother's window flicker, saw shadows moving inside, heard faint laughter, laughter that moments earlier had been meant for me. And I realized I had a choice. I could go home and let them do what they always do, or I could stand up for myself in a way they never expected. I drove home in silence. No music, no radio, just the soft hum of the engine and a quiet determination growing inside me. When I stepped into my small house, I didn't turn on the lights right away. I walked straight to my kitchen counter, placed the untouched Christmas gifts down, and took a deep breath. My hands weren't trembling. Instead, they moved with purpose. I opened the drawer under the old telephone stand, the drawer where I kept things I never talked about. Receipts, IOUs, loan agreements, screenshots I had printed with dates still visible, letters I had saved, notes I hadn't forgotten, financial papers with signatures that belonged to every person who had made fun of me that afternoon. Because while they laughed about my boring life, I was the one who bailed out my brother when he nearly lost his job. I was the one who paid my sister's medical bill when she didn't have insurance. I was the one who helped my mother cover her mortgage payment after she gambled too much money away. I was the one they called when they needed money, support, rides, food, anything. And foolishly, I had always shown up quietly, hoping it meant something. But to them, it only meant I could be used without consequence. Not anymore. I spread everything on my kitchen table, one document after another, forming a timeline of every moment I had rescued the same people who were now planning to humiliate me. They had no idea I kept records. They had no idea I had proof. They had no idea their debts to me were organized neatly in envelopes with each of their names on the front. Then I pulled out one more thing, something I had almost forgotten I even had. A small voice recorder that once belonged to my late father. I always kept it in the same drawer. I clicked the button out of habit. It still worked, and that sparked something inside me, something sharper than sadness, something stronger than anger. I set my bag down and replayed the voices I had overheard at my mother's house. My phone had recorded the whole thing when I placed it in my coat pocket. Every cruel sentence, every laugh, every plan to embarrass me. I listened once, not because I needed proof, I had lived that proof all my life, but because I wanted to hear it with the same calm strength I felt now. And I did. I gathered envelopes, I gathered receipts, I printed fresh copies of the audio transcript. I prepared every piece of truth they never thought I'd hold. And then I decided how I would send it. Not by email, too easy to ignore. Not by text, too easy to delete. Not by handing it in person, too much satisfaction for them. Number. I wanted it to arrive with weight, with authority, with timing. So I called the courier service that worked late on holidays. I paid extra for them to deliver a sealed package exactly during Christmas dinner, the same dinner they planned to use to humiliate me. The woman on the phone asked, "Ma'am, what would you like written on the delivery note?" I thought for a moment. Then I said softly, "Just right, for the family." After arranging the delivery, I sat down on the couch with a cup of tea. No shaking, no fear. Just a deep, quiet strength spreading through me like warmth. They wanted to play a cruel game on Christmas. They wanted entertainment. They wanted to feel powerful. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of breaking me. Instead, I was going to give them the only gift they ever truly earned. The truth, wrapped neatly, sealed professionally, and delivered straight to the table where they once laughed about me. I leaned back, took a slow sip of tea, and watched the snow fall outside my window. Christmas wasn't ruined. It was just beginning. While my family gathered around the Christmas table, laughing, clinking glasses, and preparing to enjoy the night they planned to use against me, I sat alone in my living room with the soft glow of a small lamp and the steady tick of the old clock on the wall. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I felt something stronger, something cleaner, the quiet satisfaction that comes when a woman finally stops letting people trample her spirit. I knew exactly what was happening at my mother's house at that very moment. I could picture it clearly. The ugly sweater jokes, the gossip, the fake smiles, the little whispers about how she probably stayed home because she's embarrassed. They had no idea what was coming. At 6:45 p.m. sharp, my phone buzzed. A text from the courier. Delivered. I didn't need a video. I could imagine every face in that dining room. I pictured the long table covered with holiday dishes, the glasses filled with wine, the smell of ham and potatoes, the silverware clinking. And then, the doorbell. I smiled softly because I knew it would confuse them. Couriers don't arrive on Christmas Eve unless the delivery is urgent or deliberate. Inside the house, my brother would probably shout, "I'll get it," while the others continued chatting. My mother would keep her fake smile ready for whoever she thought might be at the door. Maybe a neighbor bringing cookies, maybe a friend dropping off a card. They loved surprises, but only the kind they controlled. But this surprise, this one belonged to me. The package, medium-sized and neatly sealed, would be brought to the table by whoever signed for it. And I knew my sister would be the first to snatch it, curiosity burning in her eyes. "Who's it from?" she'd ask. "There's no name," someone else would answer. That would irritate her. Everything irritated her when she wasn't the center of attention. They'd gather around, assuming it was some Christmas joke or a friendly gesture. My mother, sitting at the head of the table as if she were queen of the holiday, would say, "Well, open it then." She loved being the director of the room. And then I imagined it perfectly. The moment the lid came off. Inside the box lay stacks of envelopes, each one labeled with a family member's name, and on top of those envelopes rested printed screenshots of their group chats, their insults, their plans to mock me, the transcripts of the audio I recorded, and all the receipts of money I had given them over the years. The evidence of every sacrifice I had made for people who laughed at me behind my back. Silence would drop into that room like a heavy stone. No more laughter, no more jokes, no more snide comments. The truth has a way of sucking the oxygen out of a room. I imagined my mother's face first, her eyebrows pulling together, her lips tightening, her eyes scanning lines of her own cruel words, her own voice captured in the transcript saying, "Give her the broken chair. Don't open her gift. Make sure she knows her place." Then my sister's face, turning from confusion to shock to embarrassment. She'd find her own envelope, open it, and see the medical bill I paid for her years ago. The one she pretended she handled alone, the one she never repaid, the one she mocked me for, saying I never helped her. My brother would open his envelope next and see the proof of the loan I gave him when he almost got fired, the loan he promised to repay but never did, the loan he told everyone didn't count because mom has nothing anyway. And then, the printed messages, every cruel joke, every whispered insult, every plan to break me for entertainment. The air would turn cold, eyes would dart around the table, guilt would bloom on some faces, rage on others, shame on all of them. Someone would finally whisper, "She heard us." Someone else would mutter, "She knows." My mother, stubborn and proud, would slam her hand on the table and storm into the hallway, dialing my number with shaking hands. Because when the truth exposes the ugly parts of a family, pride always speaks first, not remorse. I knew the call was coming before my phone even rang. When I answered, her voice didn't sound like a mother. It sounded like a woman who lost control. "Where are you?" she snapped. "How dare you do this on Christmas? Do you know what you caused?" And I answered calmly, softly, without anger, because I didn't need anger anymore. "Did you enjoy my gift?" There was silence, a long silence, a deep silence, the kind that tells you someone finally saw themselves clearly for the first time. I didn't wait for her reply. I didn't need it. I ended the call gently and placed my phone on the table beside my tea. In that moment, sitting alone in my warm, quiet home, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, not from hurting them, but from finally standing up for myself. The moment I hung up the phone, I knew I had struck a nerve deeper than anything they expected. I sat there holding my warm cup of tea while the snow tapped softly against my window, and for the first time, Christmas didn't feel heavy. It felt honest. Meanwhile, inside my mother's house, the truth was spreading faster than the heat from the oven. Families fall apart quietly, but when truth hits them in their pride, they fall apart loudly. My phone stayed silent for about 10 minutes, and I knew exactly what that meant. They were arguing, yelling, blaming each other. No one wants to face their own reflection when it shows their selfishness, their cruelty, their hypocrisy. They weren't angry about what they had done. They were angry that I dared to show it. The next call came from my sister. I didn't pick up. She had always been the loudest one in the group, the one who loved to speak over me, talk down to me, correct me, laugh at me, but never once listened to me. I watched the call flash across the screen and stop, then begin again, 5 times, 10 times. She wanted to explain, but her explanations only ever came when she felt cornered. Then came my brother's messages, long paragraphs filled with excuses about stress, bad jokes, miscommunication, and "I didn't mean it like that." He even tried to remind me of happy childhood memories, as if one good summer could erase years of neglect and ridicule. It was strange watching them scramble. People who think they hold power always panic when they realize their power was borrowed. The final call came from my mother, but this one didn't sound like the last. She wasn't yelling now. She wasn't furious. She wasn't commanding. She was shaken, and nothing scares a controlling person more than losing control in front of an audience. "Come back," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "Let's talk. This family looks ridiculous now." There it was, not concern for me, not remorse, but embarrassment. The kind of embarrassment that burns worse than the truth. I listened to her speak for a moment, The same woman who hours earlier had said, "Don't ruin tonight." Now suddenly, she needed me to fix the night she tried to ruin for me. "I think," I said gently, "you should all talk to each other. You don't need me for that." She didn't like that answer. I could hear her breathing hard, struggling to hold on to the last bit of authority she believed she had. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "You made a scene, on Christmas of all days." "I didn't make a scene," I replied softly. "I sent the truth." People like her hate truth more than any insult. My siblings must have been listening in the background, because suddenly different voices started crowding the phone, each trying to defend themselves, each trying to claim they never meant any harm, each trying to paint me as sensitive or dramatic. None of them mentioned the cruel jokes. None of them mentioned the plan to humiliate me. None of them mentioned the debts they owed me. Funny how memory works when guilt arrives. And then, her voice broke through all the noise. My niece, a young girl who had always been kind to me. She spoke quietly, almost whispering, "Auntie, I didn't know they talked about you like that. I'm sorry." Her apology, the only one that sounded real, softened a small part of me. It reminded me that sometimes the innocent watch the guilty without understanding what they're seeing. But the older ones? Their apologies were not apologies. They were strategies. Attempts to clean up a mess they created. Attempts to make me feel guilty for defending myself. Attempts to drag me back into the role they had assigned me. The quiet one. The forgiving one. The one who always showed up no matter how they treated her. Not this time. Finally, I said, "I hope you all have a good Christmas. Really, I do. But I'm spending the rest of my holiday in peace. Please don't call again tonight." I hung up, and for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel bad for choosing myself. I sat back on my couch, wrapped myself in a warm blanket, and let my breathing settle. I felt calm, whole, strong. The kind of strong that comes not from fighting, but from finally refusing to participate in a fight I never started. Inside my mother's house, they were still yelling at each other, blaming each other, picking apart who said what and when, trying to divide responsibility so no one had to carry the full weight of their choices. In the end, the only thing my Christmas gift exposed was their true character. Some tried to repair, some tried to hide, some tried to attack, some tried to pretend nothing happened. The truth didn't break my family, it revealed them. After I put down the phone that night, the house suddenly felt different. It felt bigger, warmer, lighter. I didn't have anyone around me. No noise, no family, no shouting, no pretending. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I felt peaceful. I wrapped my blanket around my shoulders, took a deep breath, and let the quiet fill the room. Not the kind of quiet that hurts, the kind that heals. The kind that reminds you that you can sit with yourself and feel safe. I poured myself another cup of tea, the same way I used to when life felt too heavy. I sat by the window and watched the snow fall under the streetlights. Each flake drifted down slowly, calmly, without hurry, as if the world itself was telling me to slow down, to breathe, to rest. I thought about everything I had heard that day, everything I had felt, everything I had carried for years. And in that quiet moment, I realized something that changed me forever. The people who hurt me most were the people I kept excusing in the name of love. Family, I learned, is not defined by blood. It is defined by consistency, kindness, and respect, by how they speak about you when you're not in the room, by whether they protect your name or toss it around like a cheap joke. My family had expected me to laugh along with insults, to stay small, to shrug off their cruelty, because that's just how our family is, but I was done shrinking to make them comfortable. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. More messages, more missed calls. My mother sent a long text demanding I return her call. My sister wrote paragraphs trying to rewrite the story. My brother sent voice notes filled with excuses. I didn't respond to any of them. Not out of anger, but out of clarity. Some chapters must end, not with a dramatic closing, but with a quiet turning of the page. Instead, I spent Christmas morning doing something I had not done in years. I took care of myself. I made a warm breakfast, lit a candle, played soft music, and let myself feel peace. I didn't rush. I didn't worry. I didn't wonder how they were reacting to the truth. I wasn't part of that performance anymore. Around noon, my niece called me again. This time, I picked up. She apologized once more, voice shaking, and told me she loved me. She told me she never knew how they talked about me. She told me she didn't want to be part of that kind of family. Her voice cracked when she said, "I want to be better than them." That was the moment I felt hope, real hope, that maybe the next generation would not repeat the mistakes of the last. Over the next few weeks, I made decisions slowly, calmly. I didn't cut everyone off at once. I simply created distance, a healthy distance. I stopped showing up when I wasn't wanted. I stopped calling people who only answered when they needed something. I stopped explaining myself to people who listened only to find something to use against me. And with every boundary I set, I felt a piece of myself returning. The part that had been quieted, belittled, overlooked. I began spending more time with people who truly cared, neighbors who checked on me, church friends who prayed for me, women my age who understood what it meant to be the family outsider. And slowly, I realized something that surprised me. I had more love in my life than I thought. It simply wasn't coming from the people I kept chasing. I learned to enjoy my own company. I took walks in the cold mornings. I baked for myself instead of for ungrateful mouths. I read books I hadn't touched in years. I called people who brought joy into my life. I let myself feel deserving of peace, not guilty for wanting it. My family expected me to beg to return, to apologize for revealing the truth, to fall back into the same old role. Instead, I quietly rebuilt myself. I made choices they never imagined I had the strength to make. And that became my final lesson, the one I carry with me every day. Sometimes God removes you from a table because He heard conversations you didn't. Sometimes the greatest gift you give yourself is distance. And sometimes you don't lose a family, you lose a prison. That Christmas didn't destroy me. It freed me. And I will never go back to the woman who stood outside that dining room, listening to people plan her humiliation and calling it love.